Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
And off Richardson bolts up the middle to the end zone. This could be a touchdown. Put it on the board for Bama.
Everybody knows what a big game it is, and it's going to be an emotional game, and there's going to be a lot of people talking about it.
Ingram battles, second effort, touchdown. The Bear would be proud.
The one thing the game always does is shows you very clearly where you are, who you are, what you need to work on, what you can improve on, what you did well.
Lulla trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
I think you have to have culture in your organization, which probably comes from the mindset of, the people in your organization to have goals and aspirations for what they want to accomplish and what they want to do. And I'm talking about players as well here.
The Crimson Tide will not be denied.
I guess if you're in this long enough, sometimes it goes against you in the last play of the game, and sometimes you're fortunate and it goes for you.
Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live from the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, and of course you can join us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube for the video stream. I'm Ravi Lulla, Andrew Rogers, Shane Schillerberg producing. Andrew, it's been a bit of a busy last 24 hours.
What just happened, Robbie? What just happened? We had everything planned out. We were like, man, there's this one Husker topic that I really want to get to with our audience, but we're putting it on hold again because of everything that broke yesterday and some of the biggest news across both leagues of football in the last, should we call it 12, 13 hours?
I believe the Saban stuff came down about 18 hours ago, maybe a little bit.
Okay, so we'll say the last day.
Last day.
Last day.
In the last day, you've literally had the greatest college coach of all time and the greatest NFL coach of all time be done at their jobs. Now, for very different reasons, right?
I'm happy you called them both the greatest coach of
they
all
are.
time.
I mean, listen.
Because I agree with that, but I only agree with that really because I saw them in action.
Absolutely.
And I didn't see Bear Bryant coach football.
I mean, listen.
I didn't see some of the old heads in the 70s and 80s coach, and I'm not taking away from their success. But in the new age of college football, winning today versus winning then is a lot different.
I actually think it's harder than it's ever been to win at all sports, basically, not just football, because of the emphasis that we now put on sports. Like, I use John Wooden's a really good example of this because
who's John Wooden?
He was a basketball
tennis
coach
guy
out on the West Coast for a little bit.
Could have sworn he did racquetball.
Turned down the Purdue job at one point. But back then, the competition for the best players in the country and the national championships and all of that was dramatically less because there was so much less money involved. There's so much at stake now. I mean, these are multi-$100 million organizations. Oh, I'm talking about college football, multi-$100 million organizations. You go to the NFL, you've got multi-billion dollar organizations. It's so much more competitive now because there is so much money on the line. It went from being this nice little, entertainment, sports, whatever, to big business. And things get way more competitive when people put their chips down on the table. And it hasn't been the case like that until probably, I think it really started to pick up in the 80s and then early 90s. And all of a sudden, it kind of coincided with cable. They had to fill programming hours, so they started paying to put stuff on TV. You put it on TV, people care about it more, and it's kind of this never-ending cycle that we've seen where there's so much money involved in sports now. So I don't think there's
so much care.
Yeah, and because of the money, there's so much more investment. And because you can watch your favorite team, if you live in Nebraska and your favorite team is in LA or in St. Louis or in Boston or wherever.
Yeah, you can watch the ones on the far coast. You can't watch the ones in the blackout area.
Right, yeah, as long as you're not in the blackout area. But so I don't even think it's a question that that Bill Belichick is the best NFL coach of all time and that Nick Saban is the best college coach of all time. Mm-hmm. I don't even think that's a question. And I know some people just don't like those guys, and that's fine. But,
But why don't you like them?
Because they won too much.
Because they won way too much, and you're like, I want to see more variety.
Because they beat your team too much.
Because growing up, that's why I didn't like those guys. I wanted to see multiple teams get to the Super Bowl. I wanted to see my team get there. I was sick and tired of seeing Belichick. Same thing in college football. I didn't have a team, but every year I was sick and tired of seeing Bama there.
Listen, I actively root against Alabama because of Nick Saban. Like,
doesn't mean you don't respect them.
Oh, I actually really like Nick Saban, the coach, and I think the person, like from what I've known about him, and he hasn't been super outgoing a ton, but I feel like he has been more in the last few years where you kind of get a picture of him a little bit. But I really enjoy Nick Saban, the person. I always rooted against Alabama, the football program.
As you should.
It's the same thing with Georgia now. Mm-hmm. I think Kirby Smart's probably a really good football coach. Not probably. He is a really good football coach. I haven't heard anything that makes me think he's a bad dude, although, I'll always leave that judgment open. But I root against Georgia actively now because I don't want the big dog, no pun intended there with the Bulldogs there, to continue to sit on top of the mountain, right? Mm-hmm. That's how you know someone is great, is when some rando in the middle of the country is like, man, I was actively rooting for Michigan over Alabama because I was like, nope, not again, not again, Alabama. We're not doing it today.
For Michigan because of another reason, but
you maybe again. We talked about put the money down. You start to care a little bit more.
Yeah, amen. I was going to ask you this though, because you brought up Georgia. Where does Georgia go now that Saban's out? Like, because before, like Kirby Smart and Georgia were like, they were becoming the guy.
Yeah, they were
becoming
Bama.
Bama was still there in conversation. Georgia was they may have been two steps ahead of them.
Well, they were playing the Clemson role, right? So a few years ago, Clemson was in the same situation that Georgia is, where it seemed like maybe they were passing Alabama, but then they faded back.
I don't know if Kirby Smart and this Georgia team are going to fall off.
I don't either, but we didn't think that about Clemson at the time either. So that's honestly
that's a good way to look at it. So without Saban now, where do you see Georgia going?
They might have to hire a new head coach. That's the question here.
You're thinking Kirby Smart.
Listen, I mean, that's the $1 million.
Why move to Bama if you're doing the exact same thing at Georgia that you would do at Bama?
What did we just talk about?
I'm just asking you a question.
I'm just saying, what did we just talk about?
You don't turn my question on your question.
If Bama can offer whatever number they want to whoever they want, right? I assume Georgia can match. Do they? I mean, the number that we're going to see for whoever Bama hires is going to be astonishingly high. Mm-hmm. I mean, shockingly, because they're going to have to go poach. They're not going to have to, but I think they will go poach a sitting head coach. And I know everybody says Dan Lanning, right? And Dan Lanning makes a lot of sense. There's a part of me, and we can get into potential replacements now. Let's do it. There is a part of me, because I think to find who the potential replacement is going to be, you have to know what Alabama's looking for, and specifically, right? And we don't totally know that part. But I think they're going to want someone with championship pedigree already. I would think they're going to, because what did they do when they went and hired Nick Saban? He had the national title from LSU already. Okay? I think they're going to go after someone, at least first, with a national title. Who does that put on the list? You've got Kirby Smart
and Dabo
Swinney. And I don't think this would happen because I think the game has passed him by. Jimbo Fisher's on that list as a coach I don't think it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But I'm talking about if that's what you're looking for. If you're looking for a guy with a national championship, you've got Smart, Dabo, Jimbo.
And out of the three,
you've got Jim Harbaugh now.
Yeah, but Harbaugh's staying at Michigan.
Or he's going to the NFL.
Yeah, he's either Michigan or NFL.
But I'm just saying, the active guys with national championships. I mean, Orgeron's gone, so he's out of the conversation. I think that's about all we're talking about in terms of recent national championship coaches that are active.
Yeah, because you would have to go back to before Saban won his first one in
because Notre Dame didn't get one. I'd have to look up the national champions by year. But those are the main guys, and two of those guys have Bama connections. Obviously, Dabo from Alabama. Mm-hmm. I mean, born and raised in.
And he's an Alabama graduate.
Yeah, and played at Alabama. And then you've got Kirby Smart, who got his start and his coaching career not his start, but he got to where he's at in his coaching career from being under Nick Saban.
I wonder if Dabo, though, is looked at as somebody that's peaked.
That's how I look at him.
Because of his stint with Clemson, getting there and then dropping off hard. He didn't slowly drop off. Like, he really dropped off to 3-4 losses quickly after going undefeated, winning titles with Trevor Lawrence. I don't know if that a move like that is in Alabama's future, because they have seen Dabo kind of like go off the ledge a bit, not even just on the football field, but off the field.
Yeah, he's gotten weird. He's gotten pretty weird about some of his stances on things. And listen, he's since 2019, when they lost the college football playoff to LSU, they've had multiple losses in the last 4 seasons. Now, listen, multiple losses, we're talking 2, 3, and 4. This was his worst year at 9-4 since going back to 2010, when he was really struggling to get this thing going. So his fall off has been far from where their standard was. Has not been dramatic in the sense of, other guys. It hasn't been like a Jimbo Fisher fall off, for instance. But that leaves, if you want to, I do think Dabo's a real candidate. I think 2 years ago, he's the no-brainer candidate. I think now, all of a sudden, a lot of other people are in the conversation. But if you're looking for a national championship, you're looking at Dabo or Kirby Smart, basically. That's the list. So I think you have to kind of expand that pool a little bit. A guy that we mentioned, Dan Lanning, the Oregon head coach.
Grad assistant at Bama when he first started, worked under Smart.
Really, really young. He's 37 years old. So if you're Bama, you're like, okay, we pay this guy.
He'll be here forever.
We can keep him forever, right? If you're Dan Lanning, though, and here's the other part of the equation with this job that you have to think about. Do you want to follow Nick Saban?
Well, that's the question everybody has to answer.
Yes, not just Dan Lanning.
Even Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney.
Absolutely.
Like, you're living in Saban's shadow still.
Yes.
How do you get out of his shadow? By getting above him in the all-time rankings list. Because the only way Saban got out of Bear Bryant's shadow, which, I mean, that's kind of a little unfair because, it wasn't like so back-to-back.
Yeah, it wasn't a direct. Yeah.
But still, for him to become the best coach in Alabama history and the best coach in college football, he had to win national titles more than Bear Bryant. He had to do it with more ranked teams. He did that. He had to do it with more overall wins in a short amount of time. Well, he did that.
Here's why I think Kirby might be on the table. It's kind of because of what you talked about there. His record against Nick Saban wasn't good. I think he was 1-4 all time against Saban. Not good. Okay. Saban had his number. Now that Saban's retired, he can't go prove that he's a better coach than Saban by beating him out on the field. What is a way, like you said, what's a way he can prove that he's just as good as Saban? By going back to Alabama and taking what Saban did. I don't even know if there is a next level to what Saban did. That seems about the top of the mountain there. But if he can at least continue what Saban did, continue bringing national championships to Bama, that may be playing around in Kirby Smart's head a little bit. So that's why I don't rule Kirby Smart out. I don't know. Listen, I know Georgia's an incredible job. I don't know that Alabama's that much different of a job than Georgia in terms of quality.
Like that's where I sit. And I also think about this too. How quickly do you have to win at Bama in order to not have the pitchforks and the torches waiting for you at the gates?
Oh, you have to win immediately. That's why I wouldn't want the job right now.
What does winning immediately look like if you bring in a guy like Dan Lanning, if you bring in a guy, say, like Kalen DeBoer, or, one name that I really think people should be tossing around a little bit is Lane Kiffin.
Oh, they should definitely be tossing around Lane Kiffin. He, to me, is in the Dan Lanning category, but he's actually had a longer and better track record. And here's the thing about Kiffin. Nobody recruit. I mean, you see Ole Miss's recruiting class this year, their transfer class. Lane Kiffin has embraced the new model of what college football is. Mm-hmm. He's excelling in that model. And here's the real kicker with Lane Kiffin. Alabama is a significantly better job than Ole Miss. I don't know that it's a significantly better job than Georgia. I think they're about the same. And you could maybe make the argument that Georgia has a little bit more in-state talent if you want to do a tiebreaker. Bama is a better job than Ole Miss.
Way better job.
I know Ole Miss has resources and all that. Nobody has more resources than Alabama.
And Lane Kiffin knows how to work social media in a way to
yes.
keep it a little loose and sarcastic and fire back at people without it actually hindering how he does his business.
So that's the biggest thing that I am looking for with Lane Kiffin is he's a dramatic departure personality-wise from Nick Saban. We saw that when they coached together at Alabama, and we've seen that when they've played against each other. Now, I do think
which could either be really, really good,
right,
or really, really bad.
Do you want and listen, I'd rather have Lane Kiffin's version of being quirky than Dabo Sweeney's for sure. Like, no questions
100%.
asked. I don't care about the national titles. They're Dabo. I would much rather have Lane Kiffin in that situation. But the guy that you have to be okay and understand that, hey, this is going to be a really different guy. Now, if you go like a Kirby Smart's personality, reasonably similar. They're different guys, but pretty reserved, not going to go out of pocket a lot. Like, there's guys that have similar enough personalities, if that's what you want at Bama. But I almost wonder if the stoic nature of Saban ever became a point of frustration for boosters, for media that are like, we would just like a little bit more from you. Because those guys, those types of people, probably not for fans, but for media and boosters that like access, that like getting to know the head coach. And I've heard that he's great with boosters. So the personality we see from Saban isn't the same guy that they see.
He's kind of got the Belichick personality, right?
Yes.
When he gets at the podium, he's not giving
you
a
shuts
lot.
It down.
He kind of seems like he could be like an old grumpy man.
Yeah, sort of surly.
But at the same time, like if you
hear the
peel
stories
him back and you get a story, it's a good story.
And
people like the story he shared one time at the podium, and here's the Nebraska tie when he first left. Well, when he left the NFL again and came back to college and coached at Michigan State, his first game was against Nebraska.
Yeah, he was the Browns DC, and then he came back to Michigan State.
They lost 56-14 against T.O.'s team, and when they went to go shake hands, T.O. and Saban's like, man, we're never going to win a game. Like, if this is how good college football is, and I must have forgotten about that. We're never going to win. And T.O. said, you're not as bad as you think you are. Now, was that T.O. saying, hey, my team's really dang good? Or was that saying, no, Saban, you're a really good coach. Just hang on there.
Probably a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I mean, I think T.O. knew, because that was in 95. I think T.O. knew what kind of team he had.
But also, those are the stories that you don't get unless you peel them back a little bit. And Saban's willing to share those things, or was willing to. Later on in his career, I don't know like how much he was, because Alabama wasn't winning national titles in the past, like, we'll just call it 10 years, like he was in his first 10 years at Bama.
Right. I mean,
so like he might have dialed back a little bit, but all in all, like Nick Saban, I think had a good enough personality to suffice because he won so much at Bama.
Well, I also think, so the thing that you hear about with Belichick a lot is that when the cameras are off, when the microphones are turned off, he's a totally different dude. And you see it every once in a while, these glimpses of either Belichick or Saban, where you get something and you're like, oh, that was kind of funny. Like, oh, that was pretty.
It's dry humor.
Yeah, you're like, oh, that's pretty witty. And from what I understand, he's very much the same way as Belichick in that, you know, when you turn the cameras off, when he's around people, he's very personable and stuff like that. But the difference between and I do think you probably do need a different type of guy now, a guy that's a little bit more outwardly personable, because a lot of that job, and I've said this at Texas before, a lot of the Texas job is basically like you're running for governor. Like, it's a lot of politicking and like kissing babies and shaking hands and fundraising and things like that, right? It's not that much different than running for office if you're in one of these, like, especially Southern state high profile jobs. That's why Mac Brown was so good at Texas, because he was great at the kissing babies part, right? It's like a recruiting skill set, but then you have to apply it to adults too, because you constantly have to be recruiting the support from your fan base so that you don't get fired the first time you lose a game. Saban, I think, was better at that behind closed doors than he was out in front of the microphone. But a guy like Lane Kiffin, who's a little sarcastic, kind of goofy, willing to poke fun at himself,
embraces the media,
but embraces the new media, social media.
Shoot, he before games, he would hop on with the college game day guys.
Oh yeah.
And like sit on the field or stand on the field and have one-on-one conversations with Reese Davis, Pat McAfee, Kirk Herbstreit, all those guys, as if he didn't have a game to prepare for.
Yeah, like he was an analyst. His dog has a Twitter account. There was honestly one of the funniest things I've seen from Lane Kiffin. He posted, I think one of his daughters posted a TikTok of them at Thanksgiving, and they were like going around the table and like playing the music and putting a caption over them about why they were getting fed up from the table. And then it pans to his girlfriend, who is much younger than he is. I think it's his girlfriend still, is much younger than he is. And the caption for her was thinks she's another one of the daughters. And she like gets up from the table, throws her napkin down. Like the guy gets it. He's willing to poke fun at himself. Right. He's willing to embrace social media and all those types of things. Like, to me, that is not as important as the football part, but it does matter when you're making one of these decisions in college football. Now, when we look at the NFL and who's going to replace Belichick and that kind of thing, it's a much different conversation, but I want to make sure we got to my whole list here. We mentioned Lanning, we mentioned Smart, we mentioned Dabo. You mentioned DeBoer, who, if you're going for an outside of the Alabama family hire, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I just don't know how much DeBoer fits in the South.
I don't either. But if you're just looking for really great football coach.
Yeah, he's very Saban-like in the way he evaluates and game plans.
To be fair, though, I don't know. I mean, he didn't really have a West Coast connection either before he went to Fresno.
No, but it's still north. The northern territories are kind of where he lives.
I have heard that his daughter's in high school in Seattle, so he's not necessarily like super eager to move at this point.
And why would you be? I mean, you just made it to the college football playoff back-to-back years in the college football playoff championship this year.
Another guy that I think we need to keep an eye on is Mike Norvell.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
Because he did a terrific job at Memphis. He did a terrific job at Florida State. And he understands how to build in the SEC, because that's how he built at Florida State, is he started with the lines. Because
you know what?
The lines at Florida State before he got there were atrocious for years. That's why Jimbo Fisher started falling off. That's why Willie Taggart failed. That's the first thing Mike Norvell did, and he knew it wasn't going to show up on the field at first. And so he took some lumps his first couple years. That's how you have to build in the SEC too. And Norvell understands that. Norvell's he kind of flies under the radar a little bit in this group of coaches, but that dude's a phenomenal football coach.
The ACC's in shambles too.
Yeah.
And the way FSU was treated this year, that just didn't have an effect on the players.
Oh, absolutely.
Mike Norvell,
it's the easiest.
He had to show face and say, you know what, we had a really great season, blah, 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 X, Y, and Z. But behind closed doors, he was punching fist through drywall.
Yeah, and he was probably, and it's the easiest. He's the easiest recruiting pitch, right? Because you could just go to him and say, that never would have happened to Bama. Because it didn't. This year, you could show it. This year, it didn't happen to Bama. Like, you can go and say, hey, you do that at Bama, you never have to deal with that.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be difficult to pull away from Florida State, but what you have to remember is there is a buyout with Norvell that has to be paid. Is Bama willing to pay that? More than likely, yes, if they're getting the coach that they want for their future. But let's not forget, too, that Norvell, and the way he recruits, is an absolute machine.
He certainly is. And, there's another name that people keep throwing out there.
Please don't say it.
Listen, things would have to go completely off the rails for that to happen.
If you say it, I'm leaving.
Well, then I'll wait till next segment to say it. Coming up next on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back.
I'm for whatever, collectively we decide as an organization is the best thing to help our football team. I have multiple roles in that, and I rely on a lot of people to help me in those responsibilities. If somebody's got to have the final say, I rely on a lot of other people to help, and however that process is, I'm only part of it.
We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
I'm for whatever, collectively we decide as an organization is the best thing to help our football team. And, I have multiple roles in that, and I rely on a lot of people to help me in those responsibilities. If somebody's got to have the final say, I rely on a lot of other people to help, and, however that, whatever that process is, I'm only part of it.
Welcome back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. We're on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube as well. Before we hop back into the coaching craziness that we saw in the last 24 hours, want to set the lineup for you here real quick. Our guy Shane did some great work setting up these guests. We really appreciate that. Coming up at 8 o'clock here, we kind of lucked out on this one, if I'm being honest. Danny Woodhead will join us. He got elected to the College Football Hall of Fame, deservedly so. Incredible college career at Chadron State. He also happens to have played for Bill Belichick in New England, so that's where we got a little lucky on the timing of that one. So Danny Woodhead will join us at 8 o'clock. At 8:45, we'll talk to Brian Edwards, our Vegas insider. He's got some NFL stuff as well as some futures odds on the Saban replacement.
Yeah, I heard Saban has a great story about how he missed on Danny Woodhead. So it's a perfect fit to today.
We should call Bill Callahan about that. A lot of people missed on Danny Woodhead. Michael Bruntz joins us at 9 o'clock from Husker 24/7. Nebraska got a transfer lineman last night. Nobody knows about because all this other stuff was happening. Micah Mazuka, excuse me.
Yeah, but so it looks like something that.
So it's like bazooka, but with an M.
100%. It looks like something that, like, you kind of just guess on somebody's.
I just threw a dart.
Well, a lot of times too, like people just add letters in to the spelling of their last name that shouldn't be there, like D's and Rogers. Like they just don't belong. It's the same thing with
Rodgers. Coming up after Bruntz, this was a great get. Eli Gold, the Alabama football play-by-play voice, will join us. He's been calling games for Alabama since 1988. So my guy went through Gene Stallings. He went through the desert of your Dennis Franchonis and all those guys as well before Saban finally, your Mike Shula's of the world, before Saban finally came to Tuscaloosa and brought them to where they are today. So really excited to talk to Eli at 9:30. And then we'll wrap up the show with David Cobb from CBS Sports. He covers college football at 9:45. And we got a little spot in there for some Hurrdat hot seat as well. But, I mentioned, and the only reason I bring this up is because I can't believe actual reputable people have put this name out there. And that, at least I thought he was reputable. Andy Staples, currently, I believe, with On3, put out a list that included Deion Sanders as a possible candidate for the Alabama job. First of all, no, that's not happening. But Andy Staples' justification, and I called it rationalizing his clickbait, was that Bama Online publisher Tim Watts convinced him to include him on the list because, and I quote here, Saban and Sanders are close thanks to all the Aflac commercials, and Saban respects Prime. Listen, there's a lot of people I respect that I would not hire. I respect Mike Riley a lot. He's not going to be the next Bama coach. Like, there's, I'm sure that Nick and the Aflac Duck are real close. I'm like, the Duck's not going to be the head coach.
How do you know?
He's got a better chance.
Dan Lanning's a Duck.
Maybe the Duck is going to be the head coach. He's got a better chance than Prime does for sure. Like, I don't understand the mental gymnastics you have to go through. Well, I didn't understand. And then I still don't think this would ever happen. But I brought this up earlier. The guy that takes this job is probably going to have a rough go of it. Because, and listen, even if they get a great coach, the standard that Saban has set, we can look no further than another college football Hall of Famer that got inducted from Nebraska this week in Frank Solich. That dude was incredibly successful at Nebraska. I think his overall record was like 63-20. I have to look it up to get the exact number. But Frank Solich was incredibly good at Nebraska. But because of who he followed, because of the place that he was in the pecking order after Tom Osborne, 58-19. He was 58-19 at Nebraska over the course.
Yeah, it wasn't easy for him.
Over the course of 7 years.
It wasn't an easy look for him because he followed T.O.
No, it was a horrible transition because And listen, it wasn't just Frank Solich, right? You have this for him. There was a lot of other factors, but the job of replacing a legend is not enviable in any way, shape, or form. And that's why I wonder how eager some of these guys on our list would be to take that job. Because, and listen, somebody will take it, right? Because ego always wins. Everybody's like, it won't happen to me. I'm better than that. Like, so ego always wins in these situations. But there is a guy out there that has taken a job like this before and been decently successful and has Alabama ties, and his name's Bill O'Brien. Now, I don't think that's the guy that gets this job. I don't. But
I can't ever get over Bill O'Brien in Houston.
I mean, listen.
I can't get over it. I mean, that's all I ever think about.
Bill O'Brien, the head coach in Houston, was pretty good. Bill O'Brien, the GM in Houston,
yeah, but you can't take one without the other.
I'm just saying, as a coach, he's pretty good.
And I'm not going to separate the two because I knew Bill O'Brien as both, and he was not good.
Go look at his record. He's better than you remember. There were a couple bad years, but he's better than you remember.
I'm sure the record will tell me something, but those 2 seasons where he was not, and his final season there where it went downhill faster than hitting the gas pedal going down a hill in your car. Bill O'Brien, just he can't be it for me. I can't look at Alabama and think Bill O'Brien's taking over for Nick Saban. I can't do that, Rob.
I agree. I don't think it is either. But if you start getting some no's from people, because Kirby Smart says, you know what, I don't think this is a better job than Georgia, and at Georgia, I don't have to deal with, I don't have to deal with the Saban of it all, the shadow of it all, right? If Dabo's like, I've got it pretty good here in the ACC. It's going to be easier to get this thing going again at Clemson than it is to keep it on the rails at Bama. Dan Lanning's like, I'm going to the Big Ten. I've actually got a pretty sweet deal here. I'm young. I'm going to have another opportunity. Maybe I want to go to the NFL. You start getting down that list a little bit. Each of those guys has a reason to say no.
If you're talking about NFL back to college, what about Mike Vrabel?
Mike Vrabel's interesting name. I wonder if they do that. I wonder if they would take a guy that has no college experience. That's my only question there. That's why, and listen.
It would be tough in the adjustment period that college football's in.
Yes, but to be fair, maybe it's easier to learn the new landscape of college football when you don't have to relearn it.
Stuck in the old.
Yeah, like if you're a guy like Dabo who doesn't like the transfer portal and doesn't like NIL, although he uses both of them, and doesn't like X, Y, and Z.
Sometimes, though, you need that previous experience to get you caught up to speed. And you don't want to be the head coach and then have like a number 2 who is your associate head coach that's acting as the head coach because he has college experience.
Right, because he knows what he's doing, right? That's where I would be a little hesitant on a Mike Vrabel. I like the personality. I like the football part. But recruiting and managing a collective and all this kind of stuff, I know technically that the head coach doesn't manage the collective, but let's be real here. I think that is a really big obstacle for somebody hasn't coached college football really recently. But each of those guys, each of the top candidates, we talked about DeBoer, maybe not wanting to leave that area of the country right now because of his family and everything. Each of those top guys has a reason to say no. Maybe the guy that doesn't have a reason to say no, except for maybe I don't want to follow Saban, is Norvell. Norvell doesn't have a real good reason to say no. He doesn't have a tie to Florida State in terms of previously existing before he got the head coaching job. He's got plenty of reason to be upset with the ACC and maybe want a better situation. Alabama's a better job than Florida State, if for no other reason that Alabama would never get left out of the the college football playoff. The only reason Norvell has to say no is if he doesn't want to follow Saban, which is understandable. But somebody's going to take that job. I just wonder how far down the list they get before somebody's like, yeah, I trust my abilities more than I worry about Saban's shadow. That's where it's going to get a little bit interesting here. All right, coming up next, we will wrap up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities.
We will be back. We will be back. be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back as we wrap up hour number one here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla, Andrew Rogers here with me. And with all this talk about the GOATs and Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, you know, some of the most elite coaches we've ever seen, I want you to know that if you're a volleyball fan, you can go see some of the most elite talent ever assembled on the same floor by going to see your Omaha Supernovas. It's pro time in Nebraska. Your Supernovas will hit the court for the first ever Pro Volleyball Federation match on January 24th. We're less than 2 weeks away, folks, against the Atlanta Vibe at the CHI Health Center. First serve is at 7 p.m. Go to supernovas.com for your season tickets or your single match tickets. And as I said, you're talking about NCAA champions, All-Americans, Olympians, all on the same floor together. Join the volleyball movement sweeping across the country and see your Major League Volleyball team, the Omaha Supernovas. Go check out supernovas.com. Wanted to touch on Belichick here a little bit because we haven't talked a ton about him. Obviously, being where we're at, college football is king. But wanted to touch here on Belichick as we're about to talk to Danny Woodhead at 8 a.m., who obviously played for Coach Belichick, as well as being from North Platte, Nebraska, playing at Shadron State at one time, being the all-division rushing leader in the NCAA, two-time Harlan Hill Trophy winner. That's your Division II Heisman, essentially. We will talk to him in just about 15 minutes. But Bill Belichick, from Adam Schefter here about an hour ago, his report is that Bill Belichick does want to continue to coach, and he does expect him to draw interest from at least some of the currently 7 open jobs outside of New England that have vacancies. One that he brings up as an interesting possibility, and we'll ask Brian Edwards about this, is the Atlanta Falcons. Brian Edwards was obviously out on Arthur Smith for a while, as we heard several times.
Since the start of the year.
As we heard several times throughout our conversations with him this year. I wonder how he would feel about Belichick. They need a quarterback, first and foremost. But there's a lot of pieces on that team to like. So I wonder if that's a place where Belichick maybe makes some sense. We've talked about the Chargers as a landing spot for him, although I think they're probably leaning Harbaugh right now, which again makes sense. Harbaugh has a ton of history in California, the state of California, and also as being successful in the NFL, obviously, as well. So, and he's got success with running quarterbacks in the NFL before with Colin Kaepernick. And obviously you got Justin Herbert there as well, who's a couple levels above the talent level of Kaepernick. So that's going to be interesting to see. But I genuinely believe we're going to see Bill Belichick on a different sideline next year. I don't know where you're at on that one, but I don't think he's done. I really don't.
I didn't think Nick Saban was done. There's a lot today that has
big difference, though. Saban left on his own accord. Belichick was
technically Belichick left on his own accord because they just parted ways. They didn't say fired or anything like that.
I think they were just
You're
trying
right.
to be respectful.
Saban did say retired, and Belichick has yet to use the word retire.
And Schefter's reporting he wants to coach.
And look, at some point too, it's a part of your livelihood to coach and to get out of your job and officially retire. It's difficult to not be around the game anymore. So for Belichick, I don't think he wants these last moments in New England to be the moments that, he kind of remembers. People remember Coach Belichick as, 6-time Super Bowl champ.
Yeah. But he doesn't want to go out this way.
But he doesn't want to be a 4-12 Patriots head coach. Now, what I think he would have a lot of interest in, and I think I've said this once before, is maybe moving over to the West Coast. Maybe coaching up a nice young quarterback in Justin Herbert and trying to turn him into what Belichick turned Tom Brady into. Now, was a lot of that what Tom Brady did for himself? Sure. But Justin Herbert's doing a lot for himself right now. Mm-hmm. They just need somebody to give direction. And who better than the greatest of all time to give them that direction? So I would like to see Belichick on a sideline. I'm already thinking about next year and the parity that is spread across both levels of football, and not seeing Nick Saban on a sideline, or at least when I flip over to the Alabama game and not seeing Nick Saban with the headset on. That's going to be weird for me.
Be real weird.
When I watch the NFL and I look at the Patriots sideline, if Belichick isn't coaching at all around the league, that's going to be weird for me. But if he is coaching, say, for the Chargers or for the Falcons, and the point that you brought up, I think it's my brain would have a better time understanding that, hey, football hasn't changed that much, just where he's coaching.
I think it would actually be weirder to see him on a different sideline.
I don't think so. I really don't think so, because when you know he's just there coaching, you kind of enjoy the new thing, the new start, and you're like, man, I kind of like, even though I don't want to root for Bill Belichick, I want him to succeed in this spot.
I mean, I hope that he finishes his career in a better way than he finishes his time in New England there. But I kind of feel like it's one of those, when you get these aging superstars that end up playing on some weird teams, it's like seeing Shaq in a Celtics jersey. I feel like that's what it'd be like seeing Bill Belichick with like a Falcons hoodie on, or his cutoff hoodie or whatever. Or, man, there were some weird ones. I think Patrick Ewing played for the Magic at one point. There's a Hakeem Olajuwon picture with the Raptors, which looks really, really strange. There's some like super old school ones. I think there's I think Joe Namath played for was it the Chargers or the Rams? Joe Namath played for somebody weird at the end of his career.
Marcus Allen with the Chiefs.
See, that one doesn't look as weird to me because I grew up when he was with the Chiefs. And I didn't remember him
freaking
with the
weird.
Raiders.
It is weird.
For you, I'm sure it's super weird.
Maybe if Aaron Rodgers became the quarterback in Chicago, that would be very, very,
really
very,
strange.
very strange for
Yeah.
NFC North fans.
I mean,
especially Packers fans.
It's weird. I mean, it was really weird to see like Brett Favre in a Vikings jersey. But there's all these. I mean, even like Michael Jordan with the Wizards. Like you look at that, you're like, that doesn't look quite right. Or like Dwayne Wade when he played like 4 games for the Cavs. You're like, what's happening here? There's just. I feel like that's how I would feel about Belichick being on. And listen, I think he's going to end up on another sideline. But I think it'd be really weird to see him in a Chargers hat or he doesn't really wear hats again. It's a Chargers hoodie, a Falcons hoodie. Like it almost seems weird to see him like the old pictures of him in Browns gear when he was coaching with
somewhat.
Cleveland.
I don't really look at like the historic photos. I look where like they made their name.
Yeah.
So I don't ever dip into the water. Because like when I see Nick Saban in a Michigan State or a Cleveland Browns jacket, I don't think anything of it really. I'm just like, he was just getting to the point to where he decided to go off.
Yeah.
Roger Clemens looked weird at first when he was with the Yankees.
I don't think so. Not for me.
I would say so. Yankees is like your Marcus Allen, where it's like in your wheelhouse of Roger Clemens' time. If you're not, I mean, because he went to the Yankees in what 98.
No. Well,
because he went
after.
Well, so he went to the Blue Jays in 96, and he was there for 2 years. Honestly, Roger Clemens with the Blue Jays probably looks the weirdest because he was there so briefly.
Okay, so I remember Roger Clemens
as an
second stint in New York.
Okay.
So I remember him as an Astro.
Okay, yeah.
Because that's when I was really starting to like understand what was happening in sports
at
that age. And then he went back to the Yankees in 2007. So that's why I
forget that he
after.
did 2 stints in New York.
But knowing that you're a Red
one,
Sox fan, seeing him in a Yankees jersey is probably pretty weird.
So I became a Red Sox fan, I think the year after he left. So like 97.
Then it wouldn't have been weird at all.
So, it was 99 because that's when Pedro went there. I became a Red Sox fan because of Pedro. And so it was weirder to see him in like an Astros hat originally, just because I was like, that the Yankees guy's in the Astros hat. That was the weird part for me. But there's something odd about seeing these legends and like, especially when it doesn't go well. And you're like, oh, that doesn't look totally right.
If it doesn't go well, yes. Okay, that's a different conversation, though.
Like, let's say he goes, I don't know, let's say he has a year like he had this year with the Chargers or the Falcons. And then
it'd be like, it's time to,
can you imagine,
hang the clipboard on the wall?
Can you imagine? I'm just imagining Bill Belichick in like a powder blue hoodie with the Chargers.
Hey, with a sunglasses tan, I'm telling you, I can picture it now.
Have you seen him on pictures of like his boat when he's wearing like shorts and boat shoes? I was like, that doesn't look right.
I'm good with it.
No, I'm happy for him. Like, enjoy it, bud. But
I want him to like pull out like some Caddyshack, fun golf attire. You know, the guy that like dances to Journey with his bag that's also acts as a boombox.
Yeah.
Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah, him. Yes, that's who I want Belichick to like look. That's what I want him to look like when he's in Los Angeles. I want him to put on like stuff that you wouldn't normally see. He's already got the hoodie T-shirt game going.
He does.
So he's fine there he's good for warm weather. If he could turn around the Chargers too, just think about it.
Oh, it'd be incredible.
Just think about
DB
it.
brought up a good one. He just texted me. Emmitt Smith with the Cardinals. That always looks weird.
Yeah, I can get that.
That one looks
weird. I can get
weird.
down with that.
And it's weirder even still that he broke the rushing record with the Cardinals because you're like, you're not an Arizona Cardinal. Knock it off.
But Arizona will hold on to that forever.
Yes, they will. That's probably the best moment in their franchise history. It's like that and losing the Super Bowl are the best moments in franchise history.
I wouldn't call losing the Super Bowl a best moment in franchise history.
Getting to the Super Bowl.
And the way they lost that Super Bowl,
brutal.
Even tougher.
Heartbreaking. We haven't even talked about one of the other major stories. Pete Carroll's not coaching football anymore either. Just a little national champion, Super Bowl champion.
Was he a really good
NFL
and college head coach?
Well, we'll try and get to that today at some point. If we don't, we'll get to it tomorrow. I can't have 3 great coaches retire quit on the same day.
Pete Carroll, join the conversation. You're not a GOAT. That's why you're not talked about in the first hour here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Coming up next, one of the greatest to ever do it in Nebraska high school football. Had a pretty nice college and NFL career as well. Danny Woodhead here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Rivers to Woodhead, has some room. Danny Woodhead dives up ahead to the 5-yard line. He's got a first down. Rivers looking for Danny Woodhead. He's got him, and he's in for the touchdown.
Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla, Andrew Rogers with me as well.
What up?
We are live on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, and ESPN Tri-Cities. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube for the video stream as well. Joining us now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline is new college football Hall of Famer Danny Woodhead. Danny, how are you this morning?
I'm doing good. How are you guys?
Good, man. Good. How does that feel to hear Ravi calling you a college football Hall of Famer?
Oh man, I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like a lot, like everything, that I've been able to be a part of has been an honor. I think this one hit a little differently than maybe any of the other past things because it's kind of the highest achievement. So I mean, it's pretty cool, but I'm hoping every person that played with me or that blocked for me or whatever, they feel that they have a little they feel that they have a little piece of me getting in, because without a doubt they do, and the coaching staff, because I couldn't have done it on my own, clearly.
Danny, I'm curious about, I want to go all the way back to high school, which I actually saw you play in high school because I went to Millard North, and North Platte and Millard North had some good battles back when you were out at North Platte High. But what was it like when okay, you have this confidence in your abilities and you have this confidence in what you're able to do, but to go through that kind of recruiting process and just not get much traction in terms of, either a Nebraska offer or even just general Division I interest? Like, how did that kind of shape who you ended up being, both at Hurrdat State and then moving on to the NFL as well?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't easy. I mean, I remember in 94 when, or was it 93? I can't remember, 93, 94, when we lost to Florida State in the Orange Bowl, and I cry.
Yeah.
I mean, I was one of those kids that, like, playing for Nebraska was like what I wanted to do. And so, yeah, I mean, that was a tough deal. And, the tough thing about then opposed to now is it's hard to get recruited outside of Nebraska back then if you're not offered by the only state Division I school, because back then recruiting was just a little bit different. I mean, I guess I could have, like, were there things I could have taken advantage of? Yeah. Like I could have went to my junior year. I got invited to go to the Army All-American Combine. But I didn't feel like that'd be a good teammate of me as a basketball player, because I would have missed a game. I felt like, as one of the leaders of that team, and not even a leader, but just being a good teammate, it was my job. If I signed up to play basketball, I should play basketball. And that's just kind of how I was raised. So, I mean, were there some things I maybe could have done differently? Sure. But it was tough because, you feel like you do good enough things. You feel like, I think my junior and senior year, before those years, I went to Nebraska's camp, and, I feel like I should have, I feel like I should have had the opportunity. I really do. But that's okay. And, because the thing is, the Lord had so many different plans for me. Those plans were way better. They were way, way better. Are there times I wish I could have walked out or ran out on at Memorial Stadium? Yeah, for sure. That's not how it worked out. I was able to play at Hurrdat State and have great teammates and coaches and have fans that they were standing room only, and it was a different environment, but it was an amazing environment. And then, like, that was the path that God had for me, and the path that was perfect. I mean, because I was able to play 10 years. If someone would have said, "Hey, Danny, you could have played at Nebraska and you could have won a national championship and you wouldn't have played in the league," I would have taken my path all day. And I am okay with it. I am not mad at anyone. I cheer for the Huskers. Now, did I during those 4 years? Nah. I mean, did I want them to lose by 60 every game? Yeah, I did. But
they did some.
Beside the point. They did. I'm not.
And they also didn't win a national championship. You don't have to worry about that scenario either.
No, I'm not naming any Texas Tech games or anything. But you know what I say? you feel me on it. I'm still paid attention.
Sure.
But like now I love Nebraska, and I am not mad at anyone. I live in the state of Nebraska. I love it because these are my people.
Danny, before we move on to kind of the rest of your football career and what got you into the College Football Hall of Fame, I have to ask because I don't know that people now maybe remember how good of a high school athlete you were in other sports. I mean, you mentioned basketball. If I remember right, you were averaging 20-plus points per game on the basketball court. Weren't you also really good at soccer? Was that – you played soccer, right? Like you led the state in goals in soccer, I think, as well?
Yeah, so I played freshman, sophomore, senior year. I went out for track as a junior, and I didn't run great. I think I got 5th in the 100, but I did it because people were saying that'd get you a scholarship. Didn't get me a scholarship, so I said, I'm not doing this. Like, I'm doing what I love.
Yeah.
And in soccer, so many people say, oh, track's so great for football. Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. Soccer might have been the best thing that could have ever happened to me for football because it's straight agility. And if I'm building a football team in the NFL right now, I'm not getting guys that can just run straight ahead fast. Mm-hmm. I'm getting dudes that can beat man-to-man coverage, and they can make a paycheck doing that. So, like, to me, soccer was one of the best. I mean, basketball was great too, hand-eye, everything. But soccer was incredible just for the agility and just the footwork. It made me such a better football player.
And Danny, and you're also a scratch golfer too, and I know you've done some of that after you retired as well. But outside of football, was there a sport, or maybe even including football, was there a sport that you enjoyed the most? Obviously, football you made your career in, but which one did you low key kind of love?
It was kind of funny because 7th and 8th grade I didn't play football because I wasn't allowed to because I was homeschooled and they didn't allow me to play in the school. So I became, I don't know if I'd say obsessed. I loved basketball. I thought basketball was going to be my ticket actually. And things kind of just changed. I mean, I had a great freshman year. I had a great sophomore year. My coach said, hey, this school, it was a Division I school. They want to know if you're even worth recruiting. And I said, they go, because they think you're going to play football. And me at that point, not a dumb kid, but I was like, nah, I'm playing football. And it's I could have had options. So it wasn't really dumb of me because it worked out how it was supposed to work out. But I loved basketball. But I would say into my freshman year and sophomore year, I also I always loved football. I was like, gosh, I'm pretty decent at football too.
Yeah, 10 years in the NFL, I'd say so.
Yeah, not too shabby. Now, Danny, do you think I want to go back to your point that you made on how you didn't skip a basketball game to go on maybe one of the best spots to be recruited. Do you think if you were getting recruited 10 years down the road when social media became king in terms of recruitment videos that staying for your basketball game wouldn't have mattered and you still would have gotten the look that big schools could give you because they saw everything right in front of them?
Yes. I mean, I do, but it's okay. It's okay that it didn't. Do I think there's other things too? Nowadays, a running back like what I was is kind of what people want.
Yeah.
When I was, it was newer when I was coming out, right? Kind of. I mean, there were guys that were my size or smaller at Nebraska, so that was kind of hard to. That one's kind of hard to say, but yes, I think it. Yes, I do. I think, I think the frustrating thing is not the frustrating thing is, but I mean, the career I had, I thought would get me in, and I thought my numbers would get me in, not my stats numbers, but all my athletic numbers, my 40, my vertical, my agility, all that stuff. I mean, it's the same thing, same story as when I went in the NFL, right?
Sure.
And it's okay. My story wouldn't be my story without my path. It just wouldn't. And I'm so okay with it. I'm not mad. If anything, I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful because my life revolves around my faith and my trust in my Savior, Lord Jesus Christ. And what his plan was for me, like looking back as a almost 39-year-old man, I'm like, that's like a sick idea. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's probably a sick idea because he created me and he knew what would work for me. He knew what I feel like, man, I feel like it's such a privilege that he chose me to walk out the story that he wanted me to walk out. I really do. And I all I feel is like blessed. But blessed, like when I had the opportunity to go to the U.S. Open qualifier to the final stage,
which is crazy.
I remember being at church and worship, and I was closing my eyes, and I felt like the Lord was like, I was just like having a conversation because it was right after, and I was like, I almost like started tearing up because I was like, I played 4 years at Hurrdat State, had a really good career, had a great career in high school, had an amazing 10-year career in the NFL, and now you're letting me do this too. So like, I am not mad. I am, if anything, I feel blessed that this is the road, even though during the road it sucked sometimes.
Sure.
Like, and it was very frustrating. But like, I'm so just filled with gratitude that like I was allowed to take that path.
Danny, what advice would you have then for the young players out there that aren't coming from the biggest schools and aren't as highly touted coming out of high school, that you can still make a name for yourself wherever you go?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the biggest thing is don't listen to no one. Like, I mean, there's certain things like listen to your coaches on hey, how to footwork. Yeah. But anyone that wants to say something negative, let that go in one ear and out the other, because those people aren't for you. Like they really aren't. They're not. Like, there was a coach that said, yeah, you're too small. Maybe you could be a kick returner or punt returner. Like, if I would have listened to that, my story wouldn't be my story. If I would have listened to the scouts or to maybe a general manager that's after getting released or whatever said, oh, great career. Like, I'm proud of you. Like I hate to say this, but like, I was like they were doing something charity for me being on the team. If I would have listened to that, I wouldn't have played 10 years. So like, don't listen to the negative things that people say about you, because if you do, you're going to start believing them. And if you believe them, you're going to be in a tough spot, because if you don't have any sort of belief in your skills, you don't need to go out and be an arrogant dude. But if you don't have confidence in the things that you do, you're probably not going to make it.
Danny, we're talking with Danny Woodhead, college football Hall of Famer, Nebraska native, 10-year NFL vet. Danny, I want to touch on your college career real quick, and then if you don't mind, I do want to ask you a couple Bill Belichick questions before we get you out of here.
Sure. Yeah.
But the reason we're having you on is because you did get elected to the College Football Hall of Fame. Yep. I mentioned some of your accolades earlier. 2-time Harlan Hill Trophy winner. When you left Hurrdat State, you were the all-division NCAA rushing leader. Just throughout that experience, you talked a little bit about it and just how great of an experience that was for you at Hurrdat. Is there a couple of things that stand out the most to you? Like I'm wondering at what point you understood how successful you could be. Like at what point during your either freshman year, however early it was, when you got to Hurrdat, you're like, oh, I could be really good here.
Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of confidence in what I could do. Mm-hmm. Like, so I felt like wherever I was going to go, I was going to be able to play. And so when I got to Hurrdat, I felt like I was going to be able to play. And I thought, hopefully they're not going to just be like, oh, he's a freshman, he can't play. that was my biggest worry. And my biggest worry, unfortunately, I think in any place would be, and it's not to focus on it, but is to worry about the things you can't control.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily I didn't do that enough, like too much, because I had confidence in, my abilities. And then I would say, if you talk about my whole college career, I'd say my freshman, sophomore year, I obviously knew I was a good running back, but I didn't know, if the NFL was going to look or whatever. And I think that's when I realized my junior year, it was kind of, some of the numbers that we were able to put up was kind of silly. And,
right.
And it was like more like, I can't remember, but I think I had to have averaged over 200 yards a game. And it was just kind of silly. And I think that's when it was like, oh gosh, like this is a little bit crazy. And I was fortunate to have a great line, a great quarterback, great guys, selfless receivers that would block, almost like, the Nebraska teams of the 90s when receivers were extra linemen. It felt like those guys bought in as much as the linemen. And when you have 11 dudes, kind of 10, because the quarterback has to hand it off,
mm-hmm.
but like blocking, things can work out really, really well. And I was fortunate of great coaches, great teammates, and man, just being at the perfect spot that I was supposed to be at.
Danny, moving into the NFL now, as Ravi alluded to, getting a quick take on Bill Belichick. In our eyes, he's the greatest coach of all time. But how is he great to you? How is he the greatest coach to Danny Woodhead?
The reason he was the greatest coach was because he didn't care who you were. He had no care who you were. Like, you don't have to be 6'1", 230, 6'2", 230, like coaches would try to say. First of all, that's like not like an ideal running back. There's one unicorn in Derrick Henry, okay? And outside of that, that's not really an ideal thing. And he would just put the best players on the field that he had at his team. He didn't care where you went to school. He actually didn't even care what your stats were in college. He wanted to know what you did right then and there. And he was consistent. Like, was it hard to play for Bill? Yeah, of course, because he expected a lot. But he had expectations that were like so clear. And if you violated an expectation, you're not playing or something's happening. Because, and I respected that, because there's a lot of teams that, well, it's this guy. No, Tom got yelled at. Like other places, like, oh, it's a franchise quarterback. You have to be nice to him. It's like, well, why? Like we're trying to win a game, aren't we? We're not trying to like just be a buddy. We're all working towards the same goal. And he just set the expectations so clear, and he played the best players that he had. And I appreciated that, because in the NFL, people don't get it. They're like, oh, no, everyone's trying to win not everyone's trying to win a Super Bowl. I mean, they may say that. There's really like 8 to 10 teams that really are like, we have a chance. And the other ones, it's like, oh, well, I got to save my butt. We got to start this guy. We got to start this guy. And it's like, Bill didn't care. And I appreciated that. And obviously, we don't even have to talk about X's and O's. He's the best at that. Like he's just unbelievable. And he knew offense, he knew defense, and he knew special teams. And what he expected out of you, he also expected out of himself. So like he walked the walk, even if you didn't like him and you thought he was hard, he still walked the walk, and you couldn't be mad at him. Like it's like, okay, I respect that. I maybe do some things a little different, but you're the greatest of all time because of what you do.
Danny, we've got a few minutes left here with you. By the way, you undersold your junior season a little bit. 212 yards a game in that one for a ridiculous 2,700 yards. 2,700 yards is a career, Danny.
Good year.
That's a career. That's a good career.
If that was a good year, what's a great year?
Well, honestly, I mean, I didn't run for a lot in the playoff game. I actually had only like 30 some yards. So maybe if I would have got another 100 or something, it would have been a great year.
I mean, if you would have gotten like another 240, you'd been at 3,000 rushing yards. But
that is true.
Yeah, you blew it, man.
Not me.
You really messed up your yards per game average with that that
Whatever.
playoff
I knew it was in the twos. I had a pretty good idea.
Just for a real casual 8 yards a carry that year also.
It's a good thing you only get 2 downs to get a first down in college.
That is true.
You barely needed
it's like the CFL.
You barely needed the one. Danny, one last thing here before we let you go. Got about 2 minutes left. We hear all the time that Belichick is this totally different person behind closed doors than we see in his press conferences where he's like, oh, I'm just focused on Buffalo or whatever. What did you see from him behind the scenes as far as just like a personality is concerned?
Well, I mean, the way he talks is the way he talks. He's not like, I mean, he
doesn't become Bozo the Clown or anything.
Yeah, I mean, he will. He does have humor. He does have a sense of humor. I know people don't think that. It's just we were always scared that we were going to get in trouble for something. So then when he said something funny, we're like, oh, okay, we're not in trouble. And we kind of laugh. And you have to laugh a little bit louder because it's Bill. You're like, okay, make sure you're rolling. But no, he was, I mean, he cares deeply about the organization. He cares deeply about the organization. He's not going to tell anyone in the media anything, which I think is one of the smartest things as a coach. Media gets mad, but if you are a coach, you don't want them to know anything about your team because the other teams that you're playing are listening. Mm-hmm. Just like they do. They listen to the other media, like the other coaches' media stuff, because they want to find out stuff. If you're saying like, oh, we really got to run the ball this week. Well, okay, they're really going to try to run the ball. Why would you say that stuff? I don't. To me, it makes no sense. I don't want my opponents to know anything about me. I don't want them to know anything about any of my players that are injured. So he's just vague. He's like, yeah, he was out today. He was limited. Oh, he was this. He was that. Without getting fined, you have to answer questions. So you can answer questions in the most vague way ever. Eric Mangini taught me one of the, greatest things about talking to the media, which they had like a nice little headbutting when he was at the Jets. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. But Eric said, you don't have to answer a question you don't want to. Answer your own question. So if someone puts you in a weird position to talk about another human being, great example is like if someone's, hey, what do you think about this guy holding out? Like, what do you think? Never talk about another man. Never talk about another man's contract. Never talk about another man like teammate or anything. Like when it's business, you don't need to do that. If it's in your business, don't do it. So what do? It's like, I'm just trying to get better. And they're like, huh? and they go, yeah, but what do you think about this? It's like, honestly, I'm not focused on that. I'm trying to get better.
Danny Woodhead, College Football Hall of Famer, all-time great Nebraska high school athlete, and 10-year NFL vet. Danny, thank you so much for joining us. That was terrific. Hopefully we'll get to catch up again soon.
Hey, sounds good, fellas. Have a good one.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate the time.
That was Danny Woodhead, one of your latest College Football Hall of Famers. Coming up next, we've got more Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're back halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla, Andrew Rogers here. We're on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. Don't forget to find us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube if you want the video stream as well. Want to say thank you one more time to Danny Woodhead for joining us. Really good stuff there from him and some good insight into the recently departed Patriots head coach Bill Belichick as well. But honestly, the stuff about him and his high school career and his you just really appreciate his perspective on the path that's led him to where he is today and what his career was. But the other talking about taking a path, you want to get to your journey safely. In order to do that, you got to use your seatbelt. Seatbelts save lives and prevent injuries, but only if it's worn properly. Make it click. The message is from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Obviously, Danny Woodhead arrived at his destination safely as a 10-year vet in the NFL. So definitely appreciate his time, and obviously congratulations to him on being named a College Football Hall of Famer. It is time for the Hurrdat Hot Seat.
All right.
We don't have a ton of time for it today because, I don't know, there's a lot going on. But I wanted to make sure we did carve out a little bit of time here. One of my questions is Saban related. So I want to ask you this one.
Hit me with it.
Okay. Obviously, there's a lot of things we know Nick Saban is good at that have led him to be successful as a head coach. In your mind, what is Nick Saban's most underrated attribute as a coach? Because I've got one in mind, and I'm curious what you say.
So, okay. I'm happy that you said in my mind, because in a lot of people's minds, and including Coach Rule, because he said it the other day, his adaptability is Saban's best trait. And the reason for that is he's always one step of the curve, and people try to emulate what Alabama's doing as a program, which is kind of the prowess. Rules trying to get back at Nebraska. For me, since I can't have that be the answer, I would say it's his willingness to hire to his weaknesses. And so the reason I bring that up is, and it's kind of a part of the coaching carousel that we went through in the opening segment when I brought up Lane Kiffin's name. Like, those two guys were polar opposites from one another.
Personality-wise, yeah.
Like, Lane Kiffin's outspoken. He's brash. He's a great offensive mind, but he's just completely different than the buttoned-up Nick Saban. But Saban's willingness to hire somebody that he noticed, like, yes, it's vital to have people that, have similar core beliefs as you, but he noticed that Kiffin's attributes were imperative to success, extremely useful for the team to have a variety of strengths and weaknesses. So I like just how he builds not only his coaching staff, but his roster. And I think he does a lot of the two the same way, and he's not afraid to go off the beaten path to fill a void that he thinks needs to be filled, even if it doesn't align with how he carries himself, with the culture. Well, I guess they still are a part of the same culture, but just like the personalities are just different. And I like that he finds a way to marry the two.
I feel like he doesn't let the outer wrapping take away from what the substance and core of a person is, right? Like, the outer wrapping of Lane Kiffin is very different than the outer wrapping of Nick Saban. But I think at their core, they're probably a lot more similar. His ability to look past that is really impressive. Your answer is similar to mine. Mine is his ability to identify assistant coaching talent. Because, like, that's a huge part. The number of coordinators that he's had leave and go on to other jobs. We saw, we mentioned the downfall, quote unquote, of Dabo Swinney. It started when his coordinator started getting head coaching jobs, and he started having trouble filling those roles. That's something that Saban's been dealing with for almost his entire career, but especially in the last decade at Bama. His coaches were getting picked off left and right to go get head coaching jobs at other places. And his ability to identify and replace those guys without missing a beat, because of one of the attributes that you talked about, which certainly helped in that ability. I mean, just listen to some of these names. We know about the Kirby Smarts, the Lane Kiffins. I think people sometimes forget. I mean, Jimbo Fisher comes from the Nick Saban tree at LSU. You've got Steve Sarkisian, Dan Lanning, obviously, but even guys like Brian Dable coached under Bill Belichick, Jason Garrett, Dan Quinn. So not just college guys, NFL guys. Kurt Signetti, who had that great run at James Madison, now at Indiana. The names and the list goes on and on and on. You're talking about, you want to go back a little bit farther. Mark D'Antonio was a Nick Saban guy originally. He had that great run at Michigan State. The names on this list of guys that coached under Nick Saban that ended up being head coach. I mean, even an Adam Gase, who had a couple runs in the NFL as a head coach. Mario Cristobal, Jeremy Pruitt, Billy Napier, Mike Loxley, Mel Tucker, like on and on and on. Freddie Kitchens, NFL head coach. Joe Judge, NFL head coach. The list is never ending. Charles Huff, who we really like at Marshall as a head coach. The list goes on and on. His ability to find and hire high-level assistant coaches and then be able to replace them over and over and over again without missing a beat is unbelievable. I don't think people appreciate how hard that is to do consistently well. So that is my most underrated attribute of Coach Saban.
Before we continue, Shane, can you pull up breaking news music for me?
Oh gosh, is there more?
Is there really?
Come on, Shane.
I don't know if
I need you here.
I don't know where it's at.
Come on. This just in.
Uh-oh.
Jamal Banks is a Nebraska Cornhusker.
Let's go.
Jamal Banks has committed, and he will be playing football at the University of Nebraska next season. That's per his Instagram. And I was avidly fact-checking, as Ravi and I said we both had to do a ton of yesterday, because with all these blue check marks now, who knows what's real and what's not. But per Jamal Banks' Instagram, he is a Husker, which is a huge, huge addition to that room.
Enormous get.
Should I be playing this instead?
Well, no, because that's NFL draft. He's not going to the draft.
He's coming to He's coming to Lincoln.
But I do love that music, because that gets me feeling good for number one pick, Chicago Bear territory.
Getting ready for I love the draft. All right. Terrific news. Great breaking news there. We'll talk with Michael Bruntz about that at 9:00. But you had a question for me.
Yes. Okay. So this is it's perfect, because I sat in my bed last night for 5 minutes trying to phrase this question so Ravi could not pick Washington.
Love me some Kalen DeBoer.
My question to you is this, Ravi. Okay, you are in the transfer portal.
Okay,
you're a quarterback.
Yeah.
And you are looking to win a national title.
Okay.
For some reason, you get to pick. I don't know why. If you pulled number one out of the hat, but you get to choose the school you want to go to before anybody else. All quarterback spots are available.
Well, it's because I got a cannon. People want me.
Yeah, they want you bad. What school are you choosing that's going to win the national championship next year? And here is the contingency on this. Okay.
Right.
You have to choose one of the 12 teams that are currently predicted to win the national title with the best odds.
Okay, run down
so
the
the
list for me
teams
real
are
quick.
Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, Michigan, Oregon, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State, Clemson, Penn State, Notre Dame. Those are the 12 teams you can choose from.
Ooh.
You're winning a national championship at one of those 12 schools. Who are you picking?
So am I saying who I think will win the national championship?
Well, yeah, because you're going to that school to win the national championship.
With me at quarterback.
Well, you're the number one quarterback in all of football.
Yep. Like I said, with me at quarterback.
Yeah, 100%. You have to choose the team that's going to win the national championship because you're on that team to lead them there.
You know, I really have
choose their pieces around who their coach
well,
is.
So I think you said Ole Miss was one of them, right?
Ole Miss is one.
I think I'm going to go Ole Miss because they have done a crazy good job recruiting and in the transfer portal this year. So the talent is going to be primo in Oxford, Mississippi this year. And secondly, I love Lane Kiffin. He came to the College World Series a couple years ago when Ole Miss was here. I got my picture with him. I was so happy. He is one of my favorite coaches in college football, outside of Kalen DeBoer, of course. But I'm a big Lane Kiffin guy and want to hang out with his dog Juice. Got to hang out with Juice Kiffin. Mm-hmm. But no, I'm a big Lane Kiffin fan. I think Ole Miss is going to be really good. This is my commitment to the Rebs.
So you'd probably think I'd pick Oregon out of these teams.
Oregon was
not
up
going to.
Yeah.
I'm going to pick Notre Dame.
I kind of
and the
like
reason I want to pick
Freeman.
Notre Dame is, like, if I was playing NCAA football and if I was given like 5 teams to choose from and Nebraska wasn't one of them, if Notre Dame was one of the 5, I'd probably choose them just to be a part of greatness again, play with Marcus Freeman. I think that would be really fun.
I'm a little bougie. You know I like those gold helmets. We got Brian Edwards coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio. Now, Vegas insider, senior handicapper, and fan of the cold Budweiser bottles, Brian Edwards.
It's got to be touchdown, touchdown, touchdown.
Brian Edwards.
I don't really love it.
Brian Edwards.
The way they're using the cream cheese to butter the bagel.
Brian Edwards.
I'm going with the cowgirl.
Here is Brian Edwards.
Wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi Lulla, Andrew Rogers here with me. We are about to be joined by our friend Brian Edwards on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline. Real quick, though, I want to tell you about our Warhorse Festival of Games. It is a $100,000 prop card challenge for the Professional Football Championship on February 11th. Every time you place a $50 sportsbook bet, you get an entry into the prop card challenge if you are a Warhorse Rewards member. Make sure you are a rewards member. If you go 25 for 25 on the prop cards, you will win $100,000. You have to go to the casino in Lincoln to get these done and to validate your entries. Even if you don't win, though, you'll still be entered into a $20,000 cash prize or free slot play. That's at Warhorse Casino. Make sure you go to the one in Lincoln, warhorsecasino.com for more information. But if you want to just take these ideas that Brian Edwards gives us and play some bets, you can go to the Warhorse Casino in Lincoln or at Horseman's Park here in Omaha, where they've got your kiosks as well. B, how you doing this morning?
Good morning, fellas. How are y'all?
What's up, man? A little busy. A lot of coaching stuff going on today, B. They couldn't spread it out for us at all. I just all had to dump it on the same day.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and so last night, Dan Lanning was the plus 200 favorite at Bet Online. And then I woke up this morning, he's the minus 300 favorite. And Kiffin had gone from plus 400 to plus 700. And I saw Byrne, the AD, address the team and said he wanted to, like, I would think they would take their time. But I mean, you know, I guess there's portal work to do, hiring a staff, et cetera. But Byrne said Byrne told the team that he was going to have a coach in 72 hours. So that makes me think it's going to happen fast. And look, Harbaugh, you know, we may have a decision on that this weekend. And if Lanning leaves, I mean, Oregon job could open, Michigan could open, or if they go Kiffin, Ole Miss could open. The coaching carousel, got hot and heavy when it seemed like it was almost over.
Yeah, we thought it was done spinning, and then somebody gave it another push there. You think with that time frame that the AD Byrne gave out, you think he got some heads up on this and has kind of been working on this prior?
That's sort of what I was thinking. I mean, I don't know, or I don't know anything. And I don't know that it was weeks or months, but I mean, Byrne, I'm sure, has been ready here for a couple of years to just, got to be ready at any time. So
the list in his drawer.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's literally what the ADs say. They got a list in their drawer for every sport of like top 5. Who do I call? So, I'm sure he's ready, and he's probably known who will be his top target, and I would imagine it's Lanning or Kiffin or maybe Dabo. I don't.
You think
knows?
they call Kirby Smart just to see?
I doubt it.
Okay.
I mean, just because I just wouldn't want to be denied.
Sure.
You
want your first guy to say yes?
You're going to get denied. I mean, right? I mean,
I'm with you, B. I'm 100% with you. Where do you find value in placing a bet on who's going to be the next coach at Bama with a guy that's minus 300? Like, do you even take the chance that it's going to be a plus 700 Lane Kiffin?
Nah, I think you got plus 200 Lanning yesterday. You stay away would be my advice, but who knows? You never know how these things go. I've been through many at Florida, unfortunately, and they were all headed by incompetent athletic directors by the name of Scott Strickland and Jeremy Foley, not Foley.
You feel like, or I feel like at least that personally hit you hard.
Yeah, and I mean, Ravi, you're in Nebraska. I mean, Nebraska's been through some painful coaching searches as well, so I know you guys.
Oh yeah, I'm aware. It was a long 40 days looking for Bill Callahan.
That's excellent.
Another one that hits close to home for you on the NFL side. They finally got rid of Arthur Smith there in Atlanta, and then all of a sudden, I'm seeing Adam Schefter tweet out that Atlanta might be a good fit for Bill Belichick. First, what are your thoughts there? And if not Belichick, who are some names that you like for the Atlanta job?
So, I mean, I would obviously be okay with Belichick, especially going from Arthur Smith. I'm real interested in Ben Johnson, the Lions OC, but when I'm forgetting that knucklehead Denver hired 2 years ago, who the first coach. Yes, thank you. On Monday Night Football, and you just saw right away he doesn't know clock management. This guy should never be a head coach ever. So I kind of hesitate to say with somebody I've never seen be a head coach and handle clock management, but I love Ben Johnson's offense. I did see one of the Falcons beat writers said the Falcons requested an interview on Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator for the Lions as well, who was a former, outstanding DB in the league forever. That kind of piques my interest, but I think I would rather have Belichick or Vrabel before those guys. And look, if the Raiders don't do Antonio Pierce, and I know the Titans reached out or sought permission yesterday. I saw a report about that. For Antonio Pierce with the Raiders, I would be interested in him. I just think that dude is a natural leader of men, and what he did with the Raiders this year was very impressive.
B, let's stick it with the NFL here and talk about some of the wild card round games this weekend. The one that really intrigues me, of course, is the Browns, because I want to see Flacco somehow, some way get to a point to where he faces off against the Ravens next round. But where are you kind of headed? Where's your head at with some of these games and the lines there?
Yeah, so I like over 44.5 points on Cleveland, Houston. So they met on Christmas Eve, and Cleveland won 36-22 for 58 combined, and that was with C.J. Stroud not playing. And Cleveland's offensive weapons like Amari Cooper, Flacco, and Njoku, they got a week's rest. The over is on a 3-0 run for Cleveland. Now, only 45 points last week, but that would still get us over. And again, that was with Jeff Driscoll signed off the street to play quarterback in that game. The 2 games before that, combined scores of 58 and 57. And going back the last 7 games for the Browns, the overs on a 6-1 run, and all of Houston's starting defensive linemen are questionable. Now, I know Will Anderson's going to play, but Jonathan Greenard, who's got 12.5 sacks this year, had 5.5 sacks in the first 3 games of December. He's been out the last 2 games. I think he's very questionable for the Texans. And Flacco threw for 368 yards and 3 touchdowns against them, whatever that was, 3 weeks ago. So I like the over in that one.
We're talking with Brian Edwards, our Vegas insider. The other Saturday game tomorrow, or not tomorrow, on Saturday is the Dolphins and Chiefs in that Peacock game. I know people have a lot of feelings about that, but the Chiefs are 4.5-point favorites. What are you seeing there?
Yeah, I mean, I just got to go against Miami here. I mean, it just seems like everything's against them in this spot. 3 linebackers in the last 12 days have been lost for the season. That's on top of Bradley Chubb and Phillips, who were lost to season-ending injuries earlier in the year. Their best cover corner, Xavier Howard. I don't know if they've officially ruled him out, but I know McDaniel said on either Monday or Tuesday that they doubt they're going to have him back this week. And then Waddle and Mostert, who, Waddle more than 1,000 receiving yards this year, Mostert more than 1,000 rushing yards. I mean, they're questionable. I think they're going to try to play, but I mean, we don't know. I mean, Waddle just had surgery, like a month ago? I mean, what are they, 85%, 95%? We don't know. And then the temperature is supposed to be like negative 15 or something like that. I mean, the Dolphins' coldest game in franchise history was played at 10 degrees. And the Dolphins, last thing, they are 1-5 in 6 games against teams that made the playoffs this year. When in those games that were not played in Miami, lost 21-14 the Chiefs in Germany, lost 56-19 at Baltimore, 31-17 at Philly, and 48-20 at Buffalo.
B, I don't know if your dog liked that play, but plays that I like are parlays. What's your parlay this weekend?
Ooh, I love a parlay from B. Edwards.
Yeah, so, I've got 2 options. So, I mean, I think Buffalo and Dallas, I feel really good about them winning outright. And then I feel good about the Chiefs winning outright. But that 3-game parlay only pays plus 124. But, I mean, if you wanted to go pretty strong on it, plus 24 is pretty, it's plus money. Now, but if you want to add the Lions, and I do like the Lions -3 as well. And that's kind of why I don't want to add the Lions, because I've already got vested interest in them -3. But if you add the Lions on the money line, not -3, that money line parlay would go to plus 260 payout.
I'm cool with that.
I like a plus 260 on the money line. Hey, B, real quick, we got about a minute and a half left here. I know you're big on the UFC cards. We got a little bit of action this weekend. What are you liking there?
Yeah, so Jim Miller is on the main card. He is a -135 favorite, but to take him to win inside the distance is a plus 130 payout. His last 8 wins have been inside of 2 rounds. In fact, they've been inside of the first 2.5 minutes of 2 rounds, and I point that out only because I also like under 1.5 rounds for the fight. If you took under 1.5 rounds on Miller's last 13 fights, you would have gone 10-3. Miller's won 4 of his last 5, all by finish, and he's fighting Gabriel Benitez, who's in a 2-4 slump. So Jim Miller, either -135, but I think you're okay inside the distance. Again, his last 8 wins inside of 1.5 rounds, or you can take him plus 130 inside the distance and under 1.5 rounds plus 105.
Brian Edwards, let the people know where they can find you, where they can find your picks.
Yeah, you can find my picks on Vegas Insider. You can find my content on Major Wager and at Vegas B. Edwards on Twitter. Thanks, guys. Y'all have a great weekend, man.
That's our guy, Brian Edwards. Make sure you say hi to your dog for us as well. We love a good dog. Never mind a dog interrupting an interview at all. That's our guy, Brian Edwards. Again, don't forget, go to Warhorse Sportsbook, our Warhorse Casino in Lincoln to get registered for the Prop Game Challenge. You've got from now until February 1st to get those entries in. And then after that, make sure you get them activated. February 5th, the prop card will come out. You can make your picks. Go get your entries activated at the casino in Lincoln, the Warhorse Casino.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Coming up next, Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, kicking off hour number 3 on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln for the third hour. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And we are joined now by our guy, Michael Bruntz, on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline. Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. What's going on, man?
Not much. How you guys doing?
What's up, Bruntsy?
Just a real casual day at the office.
You guys are, it's coming in droves right now, right?
Nothing's happening. It feels like the middle of summer where we just have to make things up.
You're just hoping that a watch list comes out so you can talk about the top 70 tight ends in the country.
Yeah, like with the quarterback rankings in the Big Ten, the preseason,
I remember
top 10, whatever.
I remember Kyler Reed on that Mackey watch list, baby.
Yeah. Is the sell? Are you guys talking sellout streak yet?
Is it going to end this year, bro? No.
Yeah.
No. I just wish they would have spread it out a little bit. Like, give me Belichick 1 week, give me Carroll 1 week, give me Saban. Give me a little bit of time to get the content out. It's just all bang, bang, bang. I don't like it. And then we've got a little Nebraska flavor this morning as well, with Jamal Banks committing to the Huskers via his Instagram, I believe. How big of a deal is that for Nebraska, Bruntsy?
Yeah, it's big. I mean, when you kind of look at the list of where Nebraska maybe needed to add somebody out of the transfer portal, and it's not a long list, but I mean, you needed to add a running back, and they got that in Oregon running back Dante Dowdell. You needed to add at least one kind of veteran wide receiver, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And with Jamal Banks coming from Wake Forest now, you pair him with Isaiah Nair. That's two veteran wide receivers. That's also two wide receivers who are both taller than 6'3" and weigh more than 200 pounds. So it's a little bit of it's a different type of wide receiver that I think Nebraska needed more of in their room. I mean, if you look at the group right now, it's a lot of outside of Malachi Coleman. Malachi Coleman's about that size as well, but a lot of track guys, a ton of speed, but you didn't really have that like big body wide receiver that could just go up in traffic and get a ball. And that's what you're getting with Banks. That's what you're getting with Nair. And, that piece and that ability in your offense is huge because Nebraska wants to be able to throw the ball deep. They did not do it very much last year for a number of reasons. But, your margin of error gets a little bit better whenever you got 6'3", 6'4" out on the outside that you can go and chuck the ball to.
Bruntz, I asked Ravi on Monday how far Nair and Dowdell moved the needle for him in terms of offensive completement, and he brought the letter grade from a B- before those two to a B. So if it's a B before Banks, are you prepared to make this offense an A, seeing as the Huskers also got Micah Mazuka for offensive line depth as well?
Yeah, well, it's hard to know. I mean, I think I struggle to give it too high of a grade because you just there's so many questions about the quarterback. You like where it's trending there, but anytime you have a freshman and a couple freshmen, it's still a little dicey. But you look kind of across the board. You just kind of go down the list. I mean, I think they're good at tight end. I think they've gotten much better at wide receiver. I mean, I would probably bump it up another notch, maybe a B+ now. I mean, I think you got to give yourself a little bit of room to improve, but yeah, I mean, I think they went in focused on what they needed to get out of the portal, and the Mazuka news yesterday, that was a surprise, and you kind of think, oh well, offensive line, they've got a lot of guys coming back, and it's almost like a really nice bonus. And a really kind of aggressive cherry on top when you add a guard like Mazuka that started, double-digit games across multiple conferences. So I think they've exceeded my expectations on offense with what they could add for sure. And I still think you could see, maybe later in the spring you add a veteran quarterback to the mix a little bit or something like that. But from a skill position point of view, I think they've done a great job of addressing needs.
We're talking with Michael Bruntz, a Husker 24/7. Bruntz, is there anything besides a backup quarterback that would really be on your offensive wish list in terms of spring transfer portal?
Offensive? No, I don't think so. I mean,
isn't that crazy to say after the offense we watched this past year?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you kind of feel like it. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that a lot. I feel like a lot of the issues that they had on offense were kind of at a position that's been addressed so far. Like it's a lot of it's the quarterback spot to me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I would have felt okay with just adding Nair, but getting Banks that's good. I mean, because the other thing it does too is it buys time for some of those young guys. And as much as Jalen Lloyd and Coleman and Jaden Doss and those guys got from playing last year, I mean, they're still relatively young in their college careers. And this provides some leadership in that group. And it also, I think, kind of, keeps you from having to lean too heavily, too, on that incoming wide receiver class, which I know they like, but some veteran production in that room never hurts a bit. And I know from talking to people about, especially Banks, he's a guy that's not afraid to yell and be a leader and that kind of thing. So that's always good to have.
Bruntz, is it kind of crazy to you that the offensive line transfer and a pretty good one at that, as you mentioned, a double-digit game starter, is such an afterthought at that position group? I mean, like, I feel like we felt pretty good about it. We're like, oh, nice. It's a nice little extra piece here. Like last year when Ben Scott committed and the Stanford tackle who didn't end up going there, whose name escapes me at the moment. Like
Walter Rouse.
There you go. That was, I mean, headline news. And now it's just kind of like, oh yeah, by the way, there's this lineman from Florida. He's coming too.
Yeah. Well, you didn't get the build up, right? Like,
yeah, it was out of nowhere. I thought. I don't know if you heard.
He didn't visit this time around. He visited last year. He's got a brother on the team, so he's there's familiarity there. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting that it is kind of an afterthought in a lot of ways. I mean, I just with the guys that they have at that guard spot, and Turner Corcoran, whether he settles at tackle or guard. I mean, I think ideally you'd like him at guard, but I mean, you felt like you had some young competition there. Justin Evans-Jenkins looked okay at times last year at that guard spot, I thought. You got Lutovsky coming back. They really like Sam Sledge and what he can be long-term. But, I mean, when you kind of sit back, though, and you start kind of looking at what's there and where guys are at in their college careers, it's like, okay, maybe it is a nice little bonus to have a veteran guard. I mean, I don't think that, Matt Rule and his staff are ever going to say, please, we don't want an SEC lineman transfer. Like, we got a full group here. No thanks. And they'd done their homework on him last year. He'd visited, so there was that relationship there. So I think that's where you're able to kind of take that commitment pretty easily if you're the Nebraska staff. But right now, your interior line looks pretty good with Scott. Mizuka coming in and. Just kind of figuring out the rest of the pieces. You even have kind of swing guys like Corcoran that could play both. So that's a nice luxury to have. I mean, as much as they talk about being good up front on the offensive line, I mean, they're not young by any means there.
Bruntz, I can't remember if I asked you this question before the holiday break or, I mean, it could have been even last week. My brain goes all over the place sometimes. Whenever I asked you, because somebody asked me to make an way too early prediction on the Huskers season. If you remember when I asked you that, what did you land on the record again? One more time for me. Did you say like?
I think I said 7-5.
Okay, that's what I thought. So knowing what you expect out of this Husker team next season, say they're a 7-5 team. My question to you is, how far off are the Huskers from being what Washington was this year? Like, how close are they to getting to what Washington was as a national title contender? Because they're not a team that recruits crazy well. I mean, they end up in the 30s mostly, and Nebraska's in the 20s. But what needs to get them close to that Washington point?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I mean, I think it's the one thing that, Washington did. I mean, they did a few things I think that kind of helped, but the one thing that they did in particular was they got the quarterback position right. And, I think when you look at when you're adding guys out of the portal, I mean, it's a coin flip sometimes, right? Like, you either get the guy or you don't. I mean, you're Nebraska and you have Jeff Sims, or you're Washington and you have Penix, or you have your Oregon and you have Bo Nix. I mean, getting that right is such a huge part of the question. And I think Nebraska feels like they've got a pretty strong chip here in Dylan Raiola to make that happen. And the other thing, too, that Washington did was they got a quarterback out of the transfer portal who was there for multiple years, which I think is huge. I mean, I think there's limits to kind of what you can do with a one and done out of the portal. And beyond that, I mean, they kind of had lightning in the bottle as well. I mean, they found some guys that were a little bit lightly recruited out of Texas that came in and performed really well. I mean, I think Kalen DeBoer is a really good coach. But, for Nebraska, I think it's, it's kind of just continuing to build. And, you kind of need some things to fall the right way too. Washington's defense wasn't great, but it felt like they were opportunistic when they needed it to happen. I mean, maybe that's the next step for Nebraska's defense. I mean, I think Nebraska's trending in a positive way. I think sometimes it's, a pretty big leap to go from a, 7, 8, 9 win team to what Washington did this year. And sometimes you just need things to happen. I mean, Washington won a lot of games late this season and games that were, probably they shouldn't have won. And sometimes that has to happen for you too. But I think, to kind of more broadly for your question, I just think continuing to kind of recruit to what you want to do. And I think that's the strength of DeBoer, is that, it might not be a 5 or a 4-star guy, but they know what they want. They know how to develop them. And I think Nebraska can do that. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
We're talking with Michael Bruntz of Husker 24/7. Want to zoom out a little bit here and talk about kind of the national college football landscape. Obviously, with the departure of Nick Saban, there's a pretty good chance that the coaching carousel is going to start spinning as well. But something that you brought up, I don't know if you tweeted or retweeted it, but the transfer portal carousel is about to get going as well. We think, because obviously everybody at Alabama's got 30 days from when the coach leaves to move on, and then whoever replaces them, their transfer window opens. Which do you think is going to be more interesting, the dominoes that fall on the coaching staffs because of Nick Saban's departure, or the dominoes that fall on the transfer portal?
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's the intrigue of who the coach is going to be, right? But I feel like once that is decided, you're going to have a heck of a lot longer of a story arc with the guys entering the portal. I mean, probably the world that I will live in a little bit. I mean, that's probably where my interest goes immediately. But I mean, you think about it, Alabama's roster and its signing class that they just put to bed is essentially open season right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you look at the names that are being involved with that Alabama job. I mean, just as a thought exercise, let's assume it's Lanning.
Sure.
Then all of a sudden, Oregon's roster, which is loaded, is open season. And whoever goes to that Oregon job, I mean, I would not expect them to hire an unknown.
Sure.
So that's just kind of the snowball effect there. And it's what'll be interesting though is, a lot of schools are, full on scholarships. You're going to have to make room for guys. I mean, I'm sure that they will be more than willing to make room for players from Alabama and Oregon and wherever else should that opportunity arise. But I mean, that's a kind of another little different wrinkle in this coaching stuff is not only do you have to, get that coaching hire right and get your assistants in place and all that other stuff, but oh, by the way, anybody on your roster can just walk out the door too. So there's a lot of intrigue there, and certainly SEC schools are not shy about looking at other teams' rosters and seeing what they can do to make an acquisition there.
Bruntz, thinking about all of these coaches and hearing the top names and knowing that some of them are coming over to the Big Ten this year, it has me thinking about conference realignment in a way that it could affect how Nebraska goes about recruiting in the future. My question is this: with the addition of 4 Pac-12 teams, does the West Coast become more of a priority in terms of recruit a top recruiting area for Nebraska, similar to what we saw Nebraska do in the state of Texas when they were in the Big 12?
I'll be interested to see how that plays out. I mean, I think whenever you have kind of that conference connection, I think players are at least a little bit more aware of the brands in that conference. I mean, if you're going to play a certain place, you kind of, are attuned to it a little bit more. I mean, so much of it too is just connection. And, where does your staff kind of, know guys and know that they can go into places and find guys. And Nebraska, I think, has generally been pretty strong in California. I mean, I think on the staff right now, you've got Tony White is certainly has recruited California for a long time. Nebraska's gone in and found a few guys under Matt Rule. Who's one, Kai Wallen, another. But I don't know. I mean, I think that's one where I think you got to continue to build on your recruiting classes locally in the region. They're obviously going to be heavy in Texas. It seems like Florida's an area that they're getting a little bit more into, given Evan Cooper's connections down there, Philip Simpson's connections as an off the field guy, and with California, I think you can go in there and maybe pull a guy or two out. Maybe it's a little bit more of a talented guy than what you'd be able to get before. But I just think that Nebraska is going to continue to play to its connections, and maybe if they add somebody that's really good in California, you could see a little bit more of a bump there. But I think that's probably more the likely route.
We're talking with Michael Bruntz of Husker 24/7. Bruntz, as we kind of, I think, put a bow more or less on this 2024 class, at least until the spring period, what are some of the things you're going to be looking at from a Nebraska football perspective as we go through this sort of I don't want to use dead period because that's a recruiting term, but kind of this period of lesser activity? What are some of the storylines you might be keeping a watch on before we get to spring ball?
Well, I mean, they're hosting a junior day on the 20th. And so they've very strongly turned their attention to the 25 class, 26 class. Just locally, I mean, there's still going to be a lot of talent in those classes. Nebraska just made 3 offers in the 25 class last week. And I think they're in a good spot for those 3 guys. The 26 class, there's already guys that Nebraska's offered locally. They're this time over the next couple of weeks is when you really kind of set yourself up well for the next class. I mean, you go back and look at what Matt Rule did last January. He was out to see Carter Nelson in Ainsworth. He stopped through and made a point of seeing Grant Bricks, towards the end of that January period. So you're kind of setting yourself up for the next class right now. With the off the field stuff, you still got to get the coaching staff stuff figured out and kind of what the final plan is there. I mean, that's going to happen over the next few weeks here, I think. And, that's beyond that. I mean, you're probably going to be seeing a ton of videos coming out from Nebraska of guys doing mat drills, pushing sleds in the snow, all that other stuff. So that's where the attention will be, I think.
I touched on this right at the beginning, Bruntz. I want to go back to it because we didn't dive too deep into Micah Mazuka. Is he an instant impact guy like the addition of Ben Scott was when in 2024? Like, would you say they're comparable in the matter of like status coming in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only difference would be that Ben Scott was playing a position that's a little bit more specific at center. But yeah, I mean, I think that kind of a track record suggests that he's going to be right in the mix to start from the get-go. And like I said, Nebraska's got young guys that they feel relatively good about, but I don't know that there's anybody that I would say, as we sit here right in January, has a guard spot locked down. The old coach speak thing is everybody's going to have to earn their starting job, et cetera, et cetera. But, he was a guy that created out really well. Is kind of a fringe NFL guy right now, wants to get in the mix of being a draft pick. And yeah, I mean, I would be very surprised if he's not starting at guard against UTEP. I mean, I just think he's that kind of a talent. And, like I said earlier, I mean, it feels like it's a total bonus that they were able to get him, because I don't know that guard was necessarily a spot where they were absolutely pounding the pavement trying to find somebody.
We're talking with Michael Bruntz here. Bruntz, last thing, I know that Nebraska men's basketball is not your primary beat there over at Husker 24/7, but I was just curious what it was like for you and the whole staff over there this week, as Nebraska had maybe the biggest win in program history. I mean, is that hyperbole?
No, I'd say top 3.
I'd say it's at the very least in the conversation, right? I mean,
yeah. No Set Sunday, I think, will probably always be number 1 for a while in my mind. But yeah, I don't. I mean, it's I think the team showed some toughness, right? I mean, when Purdue got it back to, was it 1 early in the second half? I mean, I was probably not alone in thinking that Nebraska was ripe to fold there, and Purdue was just going to kind of run away with it. But it's a tough team. I have some concerns about depth going down the stretch, but it's a fun team to watch. I think Rink Mast was a huge addition. Fred Hoiberg, I know, has been bullish on him since the day that he signed, and you can see why. I think he's been kind of a transformative player for Nebraska, and I don't know. People on our message board are already starting to do the, who's playing tonight, who you're rooting for, kind of a thing with the NCAA tournament. I can't remember that happening this early, so it's fun. I mean, when you're asking me what the next few weeks are going to be like, I was like, well, hopefully watching Nebraska basketball continue to roll, because that'll be a nice change.
Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7. Bruntsy, we appreciate your time as always. Stay busy out there. Pounding the pavement on that next class of Husker recruits. We appreciate all the work you do.
No problem, guys. We're only 2 weeks away from the start of baseball season too, so get ready.
Let's go.
I know that's where you really shine. Can't wait to get some Husker baseball and then some random MLB tweets from you as well as we get into spring training. When do pitchers and catchers report? Do you know?
It's always right around Valentine's Day, right?
We're getting
close.
close.
About a month away.
Yep. We're getting close. Bruntsy, I'm sure we'll talk to you plenty about that.
I think it's actually Valentine's Day this year. I think it is that Tuesday.
Well, there you go. Lovely Valentine's Day gift to Michael Bruntz there. Bruntsy, we appreciate you. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
See you, Bruntsy.
That's Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. Coming up next, we've got a great guest here. Eli Gold, the play-by-play voice of Alabama football since 1988. No better person to talk to about Nick Saban and what he's meant to the Crimson Tide. That is coming up next here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back.
Two wides left, two to the right, including Devontae Smith, who's in motion. Running back loads up, has a and a touchdown. Yards. Hello. Have we seen this script before? Two wide.
We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Two wides left, two to the right, including Devontae Smith, who's in motion. Running back, Damian, they fake it to him. Everybody's covered. Two are now delays. Loads up, has a man behind the D. Opening drive, opening passes, and a touchdown. Jerry Jeudy, 81 yards. Hello, have we seen this script before?
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. We are joined now by Eli Gold. He has been the play-by-play voice for Alabama football since 1988. Eli, how are you this morning?
I am well. How are you guys doing?
Good. Thanks for taking the time, Eli.
Sure, my pleasure.
So, Eli, I want to go all the way back. Is 1988 right? That's the year you started doing Alabama football?
Yes, sir.
So I want to go all the way back. You have seen a lot of things with Alabama football. I mean, you've gone through, was it the Gene Stallings era where he was?
I started actually with Bill Curry.
Okay.
Before Coach Stallings, yeah.
So you started with Bill Curry. You went through the end of that era. Obviously, Gene Stallings had some success in the early 90s, but then you kind of went through this really tumultuous period through Alabama football with Mike DuBose and Dennis Franchione and Mike Shula before Nick Saban kind of finally came to Tuscaloosa and made Alabama football back into what everybody thinks of as Alabama football. Just through that whole process, you have a really unique perspective. When you were going through all those different coaches in the late 90s and early 2000s, was there any inkling in your mind that Alabama football could return to what we've seen it be under Nick Saban?
Well, did I anticipate repeated national championships? I've hoped for that.
Sure.
But I don't know if I could have presumed that. But, you're right. It was a lot of years, 17 seasons of nothing, of no championships. After that national title that was won by Gene Stallings, 17 years worth of no championships. So, we were hoping to get back to a very reputable approach, but nobody could ever have foreseen what Nick Saban has brought to the table. At least I didn't. That's for sure.
So, Eli, what makes him different than other coaches in college football then? Like, what is it about Nick Saban for you that has you saying he is the best and it's no question?
Oh, his recruiting ability, his ability to sell the university to, young men and their families as he tries to bring them to Tuscaloosa. His desire to be the very, very best at everything that he does. And not only teach you about X's and O's, but he teaches you about life. As I've told many interviewers in the last day here, I said, if you didn't learn a lot about life from Nick Saban, it's nobody's fault except your own, because he has a ton to teach you. All you got to do is open your mind and your heart and just absorb it all like a sponge.
We're talking with Eli Gold, the play-by-play voice for Alabama football. Eli, I'm curious. A lot of people these days, they say with recruits, they don't like to be coached hard, and maybe they're different than players of years past. But at least from the outside, it seemed like Nick Saban coached players up as hard as anyone did. How was he able to do that and yet still relate to different generations as he aged as a coach and as players kind of changed throughout the years?
Well, that's what makes him special. He has one of those, that it factor. He was never afraid to change his style of offense. He was not going to force feed his desires to a team that couldn't execute those desires. When it was time to, when it got to the point where we couldn't keep using the Terrence Cody's of the world on third down and fourth down, he changed his recruiting style. When this style of offense didn't work, he brought in a spread offense and a hurry-up offense, and he brought in a guy like Lane Kiffin to help teach him that offense because he didn't know it that well. So he was competitive, but he was smart enough to know what he didn't know. And he wasn't afraid to bring in somebody to help him and to help these young men earn national championship rings. And of course, he won 7 national titles, one at LSU and 6 here at Alabama.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That'll do.
That's pretty darn good. Eli, you have a tremendous story, personally as of late, and just your broadcasting career. How have you gotten to know Nick Saban though off the field and maybe a more personal level? Is there anything you can share describing how he's impacted your life?
Yeah, I mean he's a genuinely nice man. He cares about people. He does have a good sense of humor. People see him. Maybe the guy watching on the tube in Omaha gets to see a 40-second sound bite. And, the coach might be grumpy. He might be yelling at the media, might be, he's difficult. Well, that's not the only Nick Saban. The Nick Saban we know is the guy who cares about people, who cares about families, who has a very good and dry sense of humor. So I've learned a lot like that. But again, I go back to my answer of earlier. If you don't listen to Nick Saban, you're the fool. He is willing to, to help you. And I've been through cancer, as you were explaining last year or the year prior. I missed the season, and he and his wife, Miss Terry, they constantly kept tabs on me. And when I ripped my knee up, 10, 12, 14 years ago, whatever it was, he was quick to check on me and sent me a sweatsuit to work out in and stuff like that. I mean, he is a genuinely nice, caring man. He doesn't abide by stupid questions. He doesn't, not at all. But he wants only what's best for everybody. And that's what's at the bottom of everything he does. Nothing that comes out of his mouth is not predetermined. It's not, he just doesn't say stuff. He is very careful in what he offers out to the public. But the man is just outstanding. He really is.
Eli, I've got about 2 minutes left here. Do you have, over the 17 years that Nick Saban was at Alabama, do you have a moment or a game or a play that sticks out to you the most over his tenure?
Well, it shows you, when I talked earlier about he doesn't mind admitting that he doesn't know something or that a change needs to be made. The thing that I remember, obviously, was the national championship game against Georgia, when he sat Jalen Hurts down at halftime because the team wasn't moving, and he brought in Tua Tagovailoa, and he eventually threw that game-winning pass to Devontae Smith. And, of course, all these names I've just mentioned, they're all superstars in the National Football League now. So, there have been more players in the NFL from Alabama than from any other school. And the man is just good at that. He is great at recruiting, and he is happy to see his guys succeed. But that was it, man. It took a big set of cojones, if you will, to
that it did.
To make that change, and that is what worked out for Alabama.
Eli, we very much appreciate your time. I do want to say it was great to see you back on the call for Alabama this year after you missed that 2022 season. Wish you the best of health and best of luck moving forward.
Thank you. God bless. You guys take care, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Eli. You too.
That is
all right.
Eli Gold. He's been the play-by-play voice for Alabama football since 1988, has had a front row seat to the entire Nick Saban era and a front row seat to all the struggles that came beforehand. Alabama's a great example of what Nebraska is trying to do. You only have to get that coaching hire right once. And once they did with Nick Saban, it was off to the races. Not saying Matt Rhule is going to win 6 national championships at Nebraska, but if you get it right once, you forget about the guys that came before pretty quickly. We appreciate Eli joining us. Coming up next, we've got David Cobb. He covers college football for CBS Sports here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up the show here on a Thursday, a chaotic Thursday on Hurrdat Sports Radio. We're brought to you by our friends at Pratt Dental. Nothing chaotic about what they do in North Platte, Nebraska. Dr. Pratt was the first dentist in Nebraska certified in the BioClear method and modern smile design, which can correct many aesthetic dilemmas in a permanent and less invasive manner than traditional treatments such as crowns. You got less time, less waiting, it's less invasive, and fewer appointments because they can do multiple restorations in the same day. Make sure you go check out their website, Pratt Dental, that's Pratt dental.com/BioClear-dental-treatment. Pratt Dental, creating healthy smiles. Joining us now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline is David Cobb. He covers college football for CBS Sports. David, how are you this morning?
Hey guys, I'm doing well. How are y'all?
Good, David. Thanks for joining us.
We are
no problem. Nothing crazy
No.
going on in college sports over the last 24 hours, is there?
Yeah, nothing crazy going on in football in general. I know you're college football focused, but you got Pete Carroll, who obviously had his nice run at USC as well, and then Bill Belichick. Yeah, they could have spread it out a little bit for us. It would have been nice. But
yeah, and to add on to that, I also cover college basketball.
Yeah, there's
because
chaos.
In Nebraska, y'all know, you guys just took down top-ranked Purdue, and then every other top 5 team except UConn is losing too. So it's been wild, but this is what we love. This is what makes it interesting.
It is live for. Certainly more exciting than a lot of times in mid-January, so we certainly won't complain. But let's start off, David, with the biggest story with Nick Saban announcing his retirement from Alabama. First and foremost, where do you think they look? Is it a slam dunk that it's Lanning or Kiffin, or do you think maybe they might go outside the box a little bit here, as their AD Greg Burns said this thing might be wrapped up in a matter of a couple days?
Yeah, 72-hour timeline. That's ambitious to put that sort of a timeline on a coaching search if you don't already have a firm idea of what direction you're going. And I don't know to what extent Greg Byrne was expecting this. As an athletic director, when you have an older coach, you've always got to be ready, but you're never fully ready for the moment when the greatest of all time announces his retirement. So The name that you keep hearing that seems to be the most popular is that of Oregon coach Van Lanning, who, of course, was a graduate assistant for Saban in 2015 and then played a huge role as defensive coordinator in Georgia's rise to prominence. So the thing with Lanning is he was so forceful and so adamant about his loyalty to Oregon when the Texas A&M job was open. And this is obviously a much different beast at Alabama, but he would have to eat some real crow because of how forceful he was about not only his lack of interest in Texas A&M, but specifically the things he said about unfinished business at Oregon and loyalty to Oregon and how he would be going nowhere. And that was just, 6 to 8 weeks ago. So if it's going to be Lanning, there's going to have to be a pretty striking reversal on his part with some of that stuff.
How crazy is it that Dan Lanning, you mentioned he was the grad assistant in 2015. How crazy is it that he's gone from grad assistant in just 8 years to maybe the leading candidate for the biggest job in college football?
Yeah, that's a meteoric rise if there ever was one. And somebody made the point, we were talking about it among our group of writers yesterday, and I thought it was a good point that at age 37, Dan Lanning is young enough to fail at the Alabama job and still have life afterwards. Much like we've seen with Lane Kiffin, who may get into this mix.
Mm-hmm.
Lane went to USC and had his dream job at a young age. It didn't work out, but here he is all these years later as a successful power conference head coach at Ole Miss. And so I think for Dan Lanning, there would be a chance to resurrect the career, even if he were unsuccessful in the daunting task of replacing Nick Saban. So that's a factor to consider as well.
David, as we kind of break down the craziness of the last day, both in the world of college and the NFL, how different will the game look next year without Belichick on the Patriots sideline, Carroll on the Seahawks sideline, and Saban on the Alabama sideline?
Yeah, it's a changing of the guard, not only in football, but in basketball as well. When you think about the departures of giants like Roy Williams and Mike Krzyzewski from the college game, and now you have their cohort on the football side all hanging it up. And, it makes you realize how many great coaches and historically successful title winners we have in that kind of like 68 to 75 year old age range right now, and that's across the board in multiple sports, and those guys are hanging it up and they're phasing out. And the thing that's interesting or exciting about it is how it opens the door for the next generation and for the new wave, and how it's a shakeup. This is a shakeup in the hierarchy of college football. And Nick Saban kind of went out with an edge over Kirby Smart, but I think that the door is open right now in college football for Kirby Smart to emerge and become that face of college football and to become the leader of the preeminent program in the sport, because I think that program right now is Georgia, even though they weren't able to three-peat. They, to me, are the top program and have the best coach in college football right now. It won't be as clear-cut in the NFL necessarily, and the slide for Belichick has been far more pronounced than Nick Saban's ever was. But it just opens the door for that next generation to step up and become the legends that the next generation of young sports fans will revere and look to.
We're talking to David Cobb. He covers college football and college basketball for CBS Sports. David, are there any names outside of the really popular pack? We talked about Lanning, we talked about Kiffin. Are there any names maybe outside of the box? I saw a couple people throw out Marcus Freeman. I think Mike Norvell is certainly worth a phone call. Who are some names sort of outside of that leading group that you think could be in play at Alabama, or even if they're not in play, you think could be successful there?
Yeah, I guess to really throw a dart, how about Mike Vrabel? Just like that was
brought him up earlier.
Yeah. Don't know if there's an appetite there among the former NFL guys right now to jump into the college game with all the dynamics that are shifting, the proliferation of NIL as this huge factor. Essentially, we're moving into an era where players will be allowed unlimited transfers. You're always recruiting in the college game. That was true before, but it's even to another level now. I don't know if there's a massive appetite on the part of the NFL crop to get involved in all of that, but Mike Vrabel's a young coach who is highly regarded, and I think he'll have other NFL opportunities, but this is a guy who broke into the coaching profession as a college position coach not too terribly long ago at Ohio State. So if there was some interest on his part in getting back into the college game, that could be a sort of wild card shot in the dark hire for Alabama. So, that's a little bit of a long shot, but maybe one to consider. And, so I think outside of that, it's likely to be somebody from the obvious group, be it Lanning or Kiffin or Dabo. But if we get beyond that, don't be surprised if Alabama can go the NFL route, because don't forget, that's what Nick Saban was. He was actually a failed NFL coach and came to Alabama and became the greatest college football coach of all time. So that may make it a bit more attractive to some of these NFL guys than your normal college job would be.
David, got about 2 minutes here. What's been more captivating this offseason, the portal carousel or the coaching carousel?
To me, it's always the coaching carousel, because the player movement, I mean, you get a few just massive quarterback transfers, and you get Quinshon Judkins going from Ole Miss to Ohio State. But the coaching carousel to me is always what's most interesting, because you look back on the coaching changes that occur 2-3 years down the line, and you see how they've shifted the makeup of the sport in a sometimes seismic way. And that's nowhere is that more evident than with the group of when Lincoln Riley went from Oklahoma to USC and Brian Kelly went from Notre Dame to LSU, and it was, oh my gosh, college football has just been radically transformed. And now you look at that coaching cycle, as crazy as those big names were, and it's Kalen DeBoer who stands out above them all as the biggest hire of that cycle. And he was one of the lesser heralded hires coming from Fresno State to Washington. And so those coaching hires just have such an outsized impact in college football. And so for me, that's the most fascinating thing. And now, you know what? Whoever Alabama hires, if they hire a sitting college football head coach, that means that program's going to have to hire somebody else. So the carousel spins on into January.
David Cobb from CBS Sports. David, we appreciate your time, and hopefully we will catch up again soon. Hopefully those headlines keep coming for you.
I appreciate it, guys. Y'all have a good one.
You too, man. Thanks.
That's David Cobb. He covers college football and college basketball for CBS Sports. Well, that show flew by. Nothing to talk about, really.
What made it fly
Just
by?
a bunch of the best coaches we've ever seen retiring all within.
I'm telling you, man, I asked him the question how different it will look. It's going to be weird.
It's going to be super strange. But we will be back tomorrow. I'm sure some of these topics will roll over to Friday. We will have a great show for you to
Patrick
wrap
Mahomes
up your...
is going to retire early.
Oh, God. Andy Reid, who's next?